This is lesson 2-1, adding rational numbers. The additive inverse is the opposite of a number. It's a fancy way for saying the opposite. Essentially, it means if the additive inverse of -2 is 2, the additive inverse of 14 is -14. A matrix is a rectangular arrangement of numbers in rows and columns. It's not a movie. Well, it is a movie, but in math, it's a rectangular arrangement of numbers in rows and columns. Rows, if you remember, go this way. Columns go this way. So if I have a rectangular arrangement of rows and columns to make a matrix, it looks something like this. Maybe 2, 3, 5, 7, 8, 1, 11, 5, 0, 8, 2. Normally a matrix is in brackets, like so. Now, within a matrix, there are elements. An element is each item in a matrix. For example, this is an element. 3 is an element. This particular matrix is what we would call a 3 by 3 matrix because it has 3 rows and it has 3 columns. Rows are named, this would be row 1, this would be row 2, and this would be row 3. This could be column 1, column 2, and column 3. Most of the time when we work with adding rational numbers, when we first introduce adding rational numbers, we talk about using a number line because a number line is very helpful. It's a very visual representation of how to add rational numbers. If I wanted to add rational numbers using a number line, let's say we have the problem 3 plus -5. If I start off at 0, the first thing I would do is I would go over 3 units over to here. So if I was to move my little arrow, I could move my arrow over to 3. So I would start at 0. I would go over 3 units. Then I have to go -5 units, which means I have to go 5 units in the opposite direction. So if I move my little arrow 5 units in the opposite direction, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So essentially, I moved from 0, 3 units to the right, and then I had to move 5 units back, finally ending at -2. So the answer to 3 plus -5 is -2. If we were to start over on this next problem, back to 0 here. -3 plus 5 says I'm going to start out at 0, I'm going to move 3 units to the left, and then I have to move 5 units back to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When I have done that, I'll end up with 2. Last but not least, if I have my problem -3 plus -5, again, you start off at 0. 3 is negative, so we start 1, 2, 3 to the left, and then we have plus another -5, so we have to add 5 more units to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we end up at -8, which is our final answer. Now, number lines are really helpful. However, not everyone wants to carry a number line with them everywhere they go just to solve a math problem. They can be cumbersome. So you have to learn how to solve adding and subtracting positive and negative numbers using things other than number lines. One of the best ways is to learn the rules. There is basically 2 rules for adding rational numbers. Rule number 1 says to add 2 numbers with the same sign, add their absolute values, give the sum the common sign. My famous little phrase is, remember the little phrase, same sign, add and keep. If they have the same sign, add them together, keep the common sign. For example, if you look at this problem right here, both of these numbers are positive. We add them together, the answer is positive. Both of these numbers here are negative. We add them together. The answer is negative. Rule number 2 says to add two numbers with different signs, find the difference of their absolute values. The sum has the same sign as the addend with the greater absolute value. Again, I like to do my little phrases, and my phrase for this one is different signs subtract. So same signs, add and keep the common sign. Different signs, subtract. Then keep the sign of the number with the higher absolute value. What does that exactly mean? Well, let's take a look at an example here. I have two numbers, -5 and +3. They have different signs. Therefore, I will take them and I'll subtract what would be the smaller number, 3, from the larger number if they were doing absolute values. So if I do 5 minus 3, the answer is 2. The number with the higher absolute value is 5. It was negative, so my answer needs to be negative. The second example, still the same thing. I have two numbers. One is positive, one is negative. The number with the higher absolute value is 5. Therefore, 5 minus 3 is 2. The number with the higher absolute value is the number 5. 5 has the higher absolute value, so it is positive. So the answer is positive. So, same signs, add and keep. Different signs, subtract. Keep the sign of the higher number, then you'll be exact. Nice little tune that you can do to go over your boat. All right, let's practice a few. So here I have -6 plus 4. -6 plus 4, two different signs, so I need to subtract. This number would have the higher absolute value, so I'm going to do 6 minus 4, which would normally be 2. -6 has a higher absolute value, so my answer has to be -2. Or you can think in terms of money. I owe my mom $6. I pay her back $4, but I still owe her $2. If you think in terms of money, you tend not to make mistakes. Number 2, 4 plus -6. The number with the higher absolute value is -6. So 6 minus 4 equals 2. Okay. -6 is still the higher absolute value, so my answer is still negative. Number 3, -26.3 plus 8.9. Two different signs. Therefore, I will subtract them. I have 26.3, 8.9. Subtract like you normally would. In this case, we're going to have to borrow. 13 minus 9 is 4. Make sure we keep our decimal points. I'm going to have to borrow again. 15 minus 8 is 7. And bring that right 1, 17.4. But -26.3 has the higher absolute value, so my answer must be negative. Now, when you evaluate expressions that involve addition, substitute a value for the variable, then simplify the expression. Be very, very careful, since -n right here can mean the opposite of n, and most of the time it's referred to as the opposite of n. Therefore, the expression of the opposite of n can represent a negative number, a positive number, or a 0, depending upon what you're using. So let's look at a couple of examples here. We're going to evaluate when y is -7.1. So I will replace, every time I see y, I'll replace it with -7.1. I have y right here, so that becomes -7.1 plus -4.3. Same signs, have a negative sign and a negative sign, so I can simply add them together. 0.1 and 0.3 is 0.4, 7 and 4 is 11, and they have the same sign as what I need to have, so it's -11.4. Fairly straightforward. If we look at problem number 2, I have -2 minus y, so -2 minus 7.1. Let me start that again. Bad mistake. -2 plus -7.1. There we go. That's better. Same signs. They're both negative, so I can add them together. I add these two numbers together, I get -9.1. Same sign, add and keep the common sign. If we look at number 3, 8.5 plus the opposite of y. That's what this is saying. This is not saying minus y. It is saying the opposite of y. Since y is -7.1, The opposite of y would be positive 7.1. So we actually are adding 8.5 and 7.1. And when we add those two numbers together, you get 15.6. Last but not least, number 4 says, again, the opposite of. So y is negative 7.1. The opposite of negative 7.1 is positive 7.1 plus 7.49. If we add those together, we get 14.59. Think about that for a second. Same sign, add and keep the common sign. Now, we can use a matrix to add rational numbers. We identify the size of a matrix, if you remember, by the number of rows and the number of columns. A 3 by 2 matrix means I have 3 rows and 2 columns. Matrices can only be added if they are equal. A 3 by 2 can be added to another 3 by 2. A 3 by 3 matrix cannot be added to a 3 by 1 matrix. They have to have the same number of rows and columns in order to be added. So once we have a matrix, we can add it together, and it's just simply a matter of taking care of the elements. For example, what do I mean by that? Let's say we have the following matrices, and I'm going to do a 2 by 1 and a 2 by 1. So if I have 2, negative 6, and I'm going to add that to 3 and negative 3. Okay? Oops, I made a mistake. Stop that. That's not a 2 by 1. This is a 1 by 2 matrix. Okay? 1 row, 2 columns. Okay? This is a 1 by 2. This is also a 1 by 2. Not a 2 by 1. I misspoke earlier. So we have a 1 by 2 and a 1 by 2. They can be added because they have the same number of rows and columns. 1 row and 2 columns. To add a matrix, you just add the corresponding elements. What do I mean by that? We add this number here in the first row with this number here in this first row. This is row 1, column 1. This is row 1, column 1. The element in row 1, column 1 is 2. The element in row 1, column 2 of the second matrix is 3. So we're going to add 2 plus 3. And then we're going to add negative 6 plus negative 3. When we add these numbers together, we will get the answer to our matrix. 2 plus 3 is 5. Negative 6 plus negative 3 is negative 9. Our matrix is complete. A 1 by 2 added to a 1 by 2 gives you an answer that is also a 1 by 2 matrix. 1 row, 2 columns. It does not change size when you're done. If it changes size, you mess something up. Okay, for example, I'll give you one more example of a matrix because this is kind of new to some people. Let's say we have a matrix that looks like this. Negative 3, 0, 1, 2, 4, negative 5. This matrix is going to be added to this matrix right here. Negative 2, negative 6, 9, 3, 11, negative 4. And I'm just making this up as I go along. The size of the matrix, right, both of these matrices, they have, there's row 1, there's row 2. So it's a 2 rows, but it has, here's column 1, here's column 2, here's column 3. So this happens to be a 2 by 3 matrix. 2 rows, 3 columns. We have to add the corresponding members of our matrix. So 2 rows, 3 columns. So negative 3 corresponds to negative 2. 0 corresponds to negative 6. 0 plus negative 6. And 1 plus 9. Same position. First row, third column. First row, third column. Add them together. Then we go second row. So if I highlight this a minute, if I decide I wanted the second row, first column, second row, first column here, that would give us 2 plus 3. And then if we did our second row, second column, to second row, second column, that's going to give us 4 plus 11. And last but not least, second row, third column, second row, third column, make sure I get my negative in there, makes that -5 plus -4. When we add all these up, our final answer will be -3 and -2 is -5. 0 plus -6 is -6. 1 plus 9 is 10. 2 plus 3 is 5. 4 plus 11 is 15. -5 plus -4 is -9. And of course, we should put the little brackets down. So our final answer for our matrix is -5, -6, 10, 5, 15, -9.